All righty. Welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I'm super excited to have our guest here today. This is a topic we have not yet covered on Guts, Grit, and Great Business, and super important one. So welcome to Lou Bortone, video marketing expert.
Thank you, Heather. It's so good to be here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so good to have you. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. I think you and I connected close to a year ago now because it was near the holidays. I know. Look at me being persistent and getting you over here on the show. I know.
Yeah.
For those of you,
I know I find.
go ahead.
But
No worries. And I'll have my editor edit this out. No biggies. Yep. So Lou and I met about a year ago. We were first connected through our mastermind group, which is, we were just talking, it's been such a great group to connect with other business experts who support folks in the same industry that Lou and I support. For those of you that don't know Lou Bortone has been a pioneer and thought leader in the video space since the launch of YouTube in 2005. And on this point, Lou was just telling me, which I think is so fascinating before we went live, that YouTube has recently overtaken all the other platforms when it comes to podcast listening, podcast hosting, which is just phenomenal to me.
Great.
Yeah, so there's that. So go visit us on YouTube. If you're hearing this and you're on one of the traditional podcast platforms, go check out YouTube as well, because this video will also go up to YouTube on the same day. So Lou has helped thousands of entrepreneurs and companies create and leverage online video to build their brands and dramatically grow their revenues. Prior to his industry-leading work in online video marketing, Lou spent over 20 years as a marketing executive in the television and entertainment industries, including stints as national promotion manager for E! Entertainment Television and senior vice president of marketing for Fox Family Worldwide in Los Angeles. Lou, I don't even think I knew that about you. So look at me learning things right here in the first minute of the podcast. So great to have you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, it's good that you do the video also, but you have a really good radio voice, because I started in radio. So that's like usually the first thing I hear is, you could do radio.
Excellent. I love a good radio show. Thank you for that. Well, and I am so curious to hear about your roots, and obviously radio, I don't think you even mentioned, but your roots in radio and television. How did you get into that industry?
Yeah, it was kind of a circuitous route, but really my dad was in the TV business, and I grew up going to the TV station with him like every weekend and kind of running around. The local TV station in Boston was sort of my little playground, and I did pretend to go on the news when they weren't using the set and stuff like that. So for me, it was just kind of a natural to go into television and radio. And I did that in Boston for many years on the marketing side. My dad was a designer, but I can't even draw a stick figure. So I stuck with marketing, and eventually ended up in Hollywood and had some really interesting, cool jobs there. And then I had twins. So the career was into a screeching halt. Well, not really a halt, but it was totally different. There was no more movie premieres and partying all the time and stuff like that. So I had to grow up and be a dad.
Right. That happens to us parents from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, I love your memories of following your own father around his workplace. I mean, it's interesting how, what a profound effect that can have on kids, right? And their own direction. What do you find once you were in the work that really kept you there? What did you love about it?
In the TV business, I think part of it is that marketing folks do everything, and they have to do everything. So there's never a day that's the same. It's never an assembly line kind of job or even a 9-to-5 job. It's just completely, one day it could be this, the next day it's that. And, aside from, it wasn't quite as glamorous as it might seem in Los Angeles, but it was definitely interesting. And there was always something new to promote, always a new TV show to work on, or, just fascinating, interesting people that you run across. And when I worked at E, I was interviewing James Caan and Nicolas Cage and William Shatner and all these, here's this kid from Boston that doesn't know anything. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, that's Sonny from The Godfather,
Love it.
So
Yeah.
I was struck, but it was kind of a good experience to really just kind of get thrown into the middle of all that.
Yeah, and I love that, that you enjoy the variety of it, right? I think, well, and I even think entrepreneurship generally, right? You have to enjoy variety.
Yeah,
There,
be ready for surprises and be able to, react and just go with the flow sometimes.
yeah,
There's
absolutely.
things like pandemics that throw everything into a tizzy.
Oh man, right? I know we were chatting about that.
Mhm,
So so much to talk about. So I'd love to hear, so you obviously built up all of this tremendous experience working in probably what is a challenging industry, I would imagine,
mhm.
for people. But also, is it challenging to stay there?
It can be. I mean, it's funny because I grew up, and I talk about this in a different keynote that I do, but I grew up in a very Italian neighborhood that was sort of, I guess there's no other way to say it, was very mobbed up. All the gangsters from Boston lived in my town. And I
Wow.
grew up where that was just kind of a normal thing, like my across the street, my friend across the street, her dad disappeared. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess my parents said, oh, he went to Florida, he moved to Florida. I'm like, yeah, I know what that means.
Oh my gosh.
Going into the entertainment business, I thought, oh my God, the mafia is nothing compared to these folks. It could get ruthless, but it's just, you just kind of not take it too seriously. Would always say, like, look, we're not, doing heart surgery here. We're just doing TV shows.
So interesting, that thread. Wow. I know my brain wants to go in 20 different directions with that story, right? Now I know, like, oh, they just moved to Florida. I'm gonna think about that very differently.
Hmm.
Um, so I would love to hear about at what point you transitioned from your career, right? Kind of working with the big guys and the big wigs, because now you are doing something a little bit different, right? Do you want to talk to us about that shift and how it happened?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to admit, I hate to say it, but I had a little bit of hubris coming back from LA. Like I can go back to Boston and be a big fish in a small pond, and and everything's just going to happen. But when I came back, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, this is a whole new career, and I'm working for
Mm,
myself now, and the stuff isn't just going to fall on my lap, and there's not a regular paycheck. So, I learned pretty quickly. Actually, the first job I had when I came back was a .com job during the .com boom, and when that bubble burst, I had to kind of
yeah.
scramble and figure out a different way to make a living. But fortunately, YouTube had just started around the same time, and I realized when a videographer that I was working with sold his big camera and got a little, I think it was a flip phone. He's like, "I'm just going to use this from now." I'm like, "You can make TV and videos with this."
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of a turning point where I said, "All right, I think we can, I think the playing field has been leveled a bit to the point where we can all do this."
Right. Yeah. Well, and even then, like, look at the difference between like some of the original flip phones and now, like, you seriously can create something with the
Mhm,
versions that we're using now, right?
exactly.
So in those early days, talk to us about how you built your business.
Wow. A lot of it was trial and error because, with entrepreneurship, there's not really, here are the five things to do. It's more like the 5 million things to do, and which ones do you
Mhm.
decide to do? So it really was a lot of trial and error. But fortunately, with video, it was one of those things where everybody was starting to realize, like, oh my gosh, we got to get on this video thing. We have to use this in our business.
Yeah.
Um, and everybody used to say, "Oh, 1999, this is the year for." It's like, okay, I say that every year, but this year,
Every Well, I was gonna say the interesting thing about where we're at now, and you and I were just talking about some of the impacts of the pandemic from the ways
right,
that we've I was joking that I've moved my house, like the contents of my house around 8 bazillion times because we had suddenly my hubby and I and two children at home all the time and having to figure out how to do business at home.
right,
But even then during that period, I really worked hard to get my clients fully online, fully protected. I come at it from the legal perspective, right? So
Right.
how do you get a business really legitimately going online? How do you support it legally? How do you make sure that you're taking care of all your IP and your assets and your clients and all the back end stuff?
Mhm.
So, but even now, I think people knew pandemic was hitting, and it was a big wake up call to a lot of people to start taking things like quote unquote their online business presence seriously. Probably
Mhm.
your boat was the same. Video marketing, like, oh, now I really need to do video marketing. But
Yeah,
how many of those folks have still fallen down and not done it?
I know. It's like, come on, what are you waiting for? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
So
Um,
it's just, I mean, I think it's as simple as you're leaving money on the table if you're not using that in your business as part of your marketing.
yeah. Is it just the human condition that it's scary to be seen? What is it that keeps
I
people
think
from?
that's a big, big part of it. And I'm an introvert. I was like the poster child for camera shyness. I did not want to be on camera because in Los Angeles, I'd always been on the other side of the camera and, you know,
Right.
any kind of on camera stuff whatsoever. Um, so I think for a lot of people, it's that, if they're introverted, if they're camera shy. And when I first started, I would, I mentioned I have pugs. I would put the dogs in the videos. I would dress up as Moses and do the 10 Commandments of video, anything to take the spotlight off me. When my kids were younger, I'd get over here, put this hat on. But, and still to this day, I'm not totally comfortable with it, but it's kind of like, this,
Yeah.
we have to do this. We don't really,
Yep.
it's like, we don't really have a choice at this point.
Right. Yes. No, it's so true. I just wonder, and I love that. First of all, clearly you have a sense of humor if you're able to like bring that out in video and, do some of that. I think some people just feel so naked, like, right? It's
Mhm.
just me sitting here. What am I going to do? How do I keep people's attention? Right? So many questions, so many fears coming up. So I'd love to know, once you got started and you started really learning what you know
Mhm.
now about, first of all, entrepreneurship, small businesses, those of us who really, really need to be relying on and incorporating video marketing strategy into our work and our business, where would you start with folks? How do you open the conversation with people?
After, slight threats and,
Yeah.
um, honestly, I just tell them that, look, the camera is not going to bite you. You just have to
Mm,
basically pretend that that little red dot or that little green dot is just speaking with someone. In fact, the hardest thing is I have my camera's up here and you're down there, and I want to look
right.
at you because
I'm sure
mom,
it's what I'm doing. I'm sure it's what I'm doing, right?
I'm trying to like sort of force my eyes up to where the camera is, but so that's part of it. But
Mhm.
a lot of it's just, if you could put your toe in the water, like I usually say that Facebook Live and live streaming is the low hanging
Mm,
fruit of video. Particularly Facebook Live because the expectations are a little less. I mean, you can be used
mm,
to tear down. If you screw up, nothing's going to break.
yeah.
So I often encourage folks, do a Facebook Live, maybe go live to a group that you're part of so that you have a little bit more comfort. And then as you get your sea legs or your video legs, you can move on to LinkedIn and YouTube and the
Mhm.
platforms that are a little bit more. I wouldn't say LinkedIn's more intimidating, but I think there's a little bit of a different expectation on
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
I think it is. I think that's fair. I feel that way about LinkedIn. Like I see it as a little bit more intimidating than some of the other platforms.
Yeah, and it's really just about the audience too. I mean,
Mm,
where is your target market? Where is your audience hanging out? I mean,
mhm.
I do a little bit of TikTok, but I don't do that much because that's a much younger audience and
Yeah.
just enough to kind of be able to tell other folks what to do. But you don't have to be everywhere. That's the other thing that people worry about with getting started with video. They think, oh my God, as soon as I start this, I'm gonna have to be on TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. And you really don't have to be everywhere. It's really a matter of deciding where your audience is and where you're the most comfortable, and then finding that what I call video sweet spot. Like, okay, I love
Mm,
slides because I can hide behind the PowerPoint and still teach. And other folks love live video. Other people,
mhm.
YouTube or TikTok. You got to figure out, where you most comfortable and where you're going to have the most impact.
Well, I think it's probably such a relief for people to hear you don't have to be everywhere because I think there are some folks online that will tell you that are like, you hear their voices everywhere saying you do have to be everywhere.
Mhm. Well, and if you do, the nice part about that is that, you really can repurpose and automate so much of it. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but I went to Italy for 3 weeks earlier this year. And I
Ah,
didn't eat because I had everything scheduled and automated. And I was doing, if I put a video on YouTube, I made sure that I put it on Facebook and LinkedIn. So it seemed like I didn't really disappear for a few weeks. And meanwhile, I'm gallivanting around Italy, not really working.
right. Oh, must be nice. I know. Great. I mean, good on you. And obviously, just some support with your systems. Anybody can do that.
Mhm.
Just a matter of getting those down. So assuming you can get people, and for people that are already there over the hump, recognizing, okay, I know I need to do this. And I want to be at minimum in the places where my people are, even if I'm not everywhere. But,
Mhm.
maybe the next hump is they're thinking, how do I do it well? Right? None of us want to be the person that shows up on video and people are checking it out for 2 seconds and then they peace out, right? Which can happen.
Right. Or the other thing is where I've heard people talk about hostage videos. I'm like, oh my God, you look like somebody's holding you hostage, and you've got a cement wall behind you,
Right.
and
They're so uncomfortable.
you're terrified. And it's like, okay,
Mm,
it's only video. You're not going to break the internet. So,
yes.
so I mean, the hardest part is getting started, and then the second hardest part is being consistent and sticking with it.
Yeah. Yeah. That consistency piece, I think, is a challenge for so many of us. I know from the perspective even of being a parent during the
Mhm.
pandemic and an entrepreneur, like I will say the first year of the pandemic, I was maybe more consistent than I've ever been. And I think part of it is I don't know. I don't know how I actually did that looking backwards, because last year I did not manage to remain as consistent. And um but it was one of the first times that experiment, and I think I told you this, I went live weekly, right? I had an Ask Me Anything live every Monday. I was there for questions. I was emailing my list. I would support people with whatever legal stuff came up, because my big goal was to get my people online and legally protected, right? I knew that the pandemic was going to be rough for a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
So, but the benefit of that is it allowed me, even when I didn't know it was happening, to
Mhm.
develop with relationships with people that I didn't know were watching, right? Or
Right.
that I didn't know were opening my emails, because I also emailed weekly. And it was such a great experiment from the standpoint of, if I missed a week, I'd hear from people like, hey, are you okay? What happened? And that was the first time that ever happened in my business, where people I didn't know were reaching out saying, hey, are you okay? I didn't see anything from you this week.
Yeah, it's like appointment viewing. People sort of get into that habit, like back in the day when we used to watch Seinfeld at 9 p.m. on NBC or whatever.
Right.
So that's as soon as that consistency is broken, people are like, whoa, where did she go? What happened?
Yeah. Yeah. How do you help your folks become more consistent?
I really, it's kind of like cheating, but I really encourage them to batch record. So I say, look, if you're gonna
Mhm.
get your lights set up, and the next door neighbor is not blowing his leaves and making a lot of noise, do 4, 5, 6 videos at the same time. So oftentimes I'll have my clients do several videos and then drip them out, or do one. Oftentimes I'll do a Zoom interview like this and interview somebody for an hour and then take their footage. I'm like, I can make 12 videos out of that in 1 hour. So do that and then kind of drip it out every week, every 3 weeks, however often you want to do it. So and batch recording kind of even me. I'm not as consistent as I should be, but when I do it in fits and starts, and if I'm going to do a bunch of videos and the pugs are taking a nap, so it's quiet, I'm going to try to get as many done as I can.
Right. What do you say to the folks who are sitting here thinking like, well, that's all well and fine, but I don't know what I would talk about having to do 6 or 7 or 8 videos in a row.
Yeah.
I think some people feel like they have to be hit with inspiration to be able to do that. What do you say to folks that struggle with that piece?
That's kind of where the strategy comes in and why it's so important to have a video marketing plan, just like you've got a marketing plan or a legal plan or whatever it may be. If okay, I'm doing a launch in January and I'm going to do a new product, or I'm doing such and such and I want to have a YouTube tips series. If I've got to do these 5 videos for YouTube and I've got to do a video for my homepage, if you have that as a plan, then
Mhm.
okay, I know the exact 7 videos that I need to do in the next 3 weeks.
I love that. I've also heard some people will say that they just collect, like they'll just keep a running tab of ideas, like of just regular
Mhm.
questions they get from,
Yeah,
from clients or people or whatever. So they don't ever have to actually like create on the spot. They've got a list that they can just work from that they
yeah,
know are topics that are relevant, right?
right. And I think the other thing is that people don't realize how much expertise they have, or in their niche, like we take it for granted. And I mean, I probably have 20 questions I could ask you right now that you just think, oh, doesn't everybody know that stuff?
Yes. Oh, that's such a good point, right? Taking us back to square one, even in regards to our own expertise, it's like we just can't see the forest for the trees because we're so close to our own stuff.
Yep. And the other thing that I've been doing is sort of going online and looking at Google Trends, or, going into YouTube and typing a phrase, or, like who's searching for this? And I can say, oh my God,
Mhm.
I thought that was a given, like, how to do green screen in Zoom. I'm like, well, doesn't everybody know how to do that? And meanwhile, there are 20,000 people a month searching that on Google. So yeah, that would probably make a good video.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. Yes. Uh, well, I love it. Sounds like there are a lot of ways to gather great ideas. How do you help your people so they're ready, right?
Mhm.
They're getting some consistency down. What are the other components that make for a really good video strategy,
Right.
particularly for a small business, an online entrepreneur, right? Talking to the kinds of folks that we serve.
Yeah, well, I often tell folks, almost like anything else, you begin with the end in mind. I think that was a Brian Tracy quote, but reverse engineer it. Where do
Mhm.
you need folks to do? What action do you want them to take? Do you
Mhm.
want them to come to your store? Do you want them to buy your product? Do you want to sell more books? And then back out of that and figure out, okay, well, what's the right message and the right frequency to get them there? So
Mhm.
I try to have my clients really begin with the end in mind and back out of it and say, let's figure out what we need to do from a video standpoint to get you there.
Mm. How many people get stuck on the right messaging? I imagine you know a
Hmm.
lot about that being in the video world, that it's not just video that
Yeah.
you.
What do I say? How do I say
Mhm.
it? Is anybody going to care?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really easy to get stuck on the messaging. And again, it comes back to, like, I usually say, look, anything that you can do from a marketing standpoint, you can add video to that and enhance it. So I like to tell my folks, look, you should have a video at every stage of the customer journey, whether it's finding
Mm.
out about you and maybe they're downloading a freebie if they're in the online world, or they're sort of in the pipeline or in the funnel, but you want to increase your credibility with them. So all those different stages of sort of the buying stages, if they have a video holding their hand every step of the way, it's going to be that much easier for them to take action. And they're going to, if they see, like, well, there's this guy that does all these video blog posts, but he never does video. But then there's this guy, Lou, that does video, and I feel like I know him because I see him online a lot. I think that's, it also goes a long way in building that know, like, and trust, which I know is just as important in your industry.
Yeah, that's huge. The reminder of that point of like, I feel like I know this person, right? And
Mhm.
I didn't understand that until I did this experiment in my own business. And I got people who were like, I had one guy reach out of the blue and I didn't know him. He was apparently on my list. And he said, yeah, I've known for a couple years now that you're the person I was going to work with. I've been on your list. I follow all your stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I just remember thinking, isn't that fascinating? Like this person has been preparing to make this decision for a couple
Yeah.
of years,
Yeah. I
right?
have people that say, I've followed you for 6 years and now it's finally time. I'm like, okay, well, I'm here. So,
Yeah, it's such a reminder about, first of all, the importance of consistency and
mhm,
the fact that, I think a lot of people get really hung up on having, a quick conversion process or a method. And it's really like anything else that is important in life, it's about the building relationships, right?
yeah,
And really what that takes to do it well.
exactly. I have kind of a funny example that I was working with a doctor in Atlanta whose specialty was vasectomies, and he would do these little videos like, okay, it's 12 hours afterwards or 12 hours before. Here's what to expect, and then he'd send them afterwards like, okay, it's 24 hours, how you feeling? Here's what, this is normal, blah, blah. But, that such trust and rapport that if somebody else in Atlanta's like, hey, I know the doctor you should go to if you're going to get that done. So it's so funny, he's like, he came to me and he said, I want to be the vasectomy king of Atlanta. I'm like, okay, let's do it. So,
Wow, right? The micro niches, the micro niche niche.
Topics where it's like, well, basically all he's doing is building trust and credibility, and he's doing it with video, and he's doing it in a very personal way where he's saying, I know where you are in this process now, and I want to address it.
Yeah. Well, and even that point, you saying that like there should be a video for every step of the client journey reminds me, years ago, I worked with a company called Sixth Division, which is they're Infusionsoft, right, experts. They're
Right.
like the green berets of the Infusionsoft world. And they have this whole like very, very systematized approach to their client experience, you can imagine. And but they really do it well to the nth degree. Like just what you were saying, if you signed up for a service, because at the time, pre-pandemic, this was, you'd have to go to their location, in Phoenix or Gilbert, somewhere in Arizona. But you got a video first saying, here's what's going to happen when you show up, and like literally starting at the outside of the building. Here's what our building looks like.
Yeah.
You're going to come into the entryway that looks like this. You're going to go up the stairs. Here's our door, And I remember thinking like, this is so interesting, because one of the things that I coach people on is appropriately doing more work to appropriately set client expectations. Right. How do we avoid some of the biggest issues in our business that can involve legal disputes and problems later on? Well, it's partly about attracting the right clients, working with the right people, but also setting the right expectations so that you're not setting yourself up for an experience that you're not meeting from the client perspective, right? And I thought this video, like using video, is such a powerful way to do that, to help do that, right?
Yeah. I have, a mentor and old friend, Michael Port, who wrote a book called Book Yourself Solid. And he would always say, people buy based on the amount of trust you have earned. And I think you can accelerate that process of building trust.
So true. So true. I love that. That's a great quote. So I know we've talked a bit about, first of all, the challenge of being consistent, right? The challenge of, first of all, overcoming human nature in the first place to get yourself on video, being consistent, right? People can feel challenged in having the right marketing message. Are there any other kind of core challenges that we should talk about?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about consistency, that just being difficult. And I think the other thing is that people think that they need more than they do. Like, I can't start until I have such and such a microphone. I mean,
or like fancy equipment, or
I've been doing it for 15 years, and I just finally last week got a teleprompter because I don't use it that often. But you don't need a teleprompter. You don't need $1,000 camera. I'm like, if you have one of these, and most people do, then you're ready, because that's all you need.
yeah.
So I think people tend to procrastinate because they're like, well, when I do this or when I do that, or
Gonna get a soundproof room. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't wait, just jump in.
Well, and I have to say, one of the silver linings that I think came from the pandemic was, and I've talked about this before, but just because from a parenting perspective, it was so funny at the time that it happened. You remember that guy getting interviewed it was like a little snapshot that flew around the internet, like a little short video, right? The dad who was like on a major news network from his home office or something. And here comes the kid in the background, and the wife is like, trying to pull the kid back. And then overnight that became the experience for so many of us.
Viral. It's like, that's not a bad thing. I mean, I guess if something crazy was going on in the background, but
right.
you just realize that, a lot of us are still working from home, and anything can happen, and don't let that stop you from, doing.
Seems like, so I'd be curious, especially you as a kind of an expert in the industry, definitely I think the pandemic made going online, doing videos like that more accessible. People felt like, okay, maybe I don't have to be a perfectionist to still be able to do this. Right. But has it changed the quality of the videos that you see or that, are out there?
It's funny because I think the quality of broadcast went down because you'd have, oh my God, I have a guest on CNN, and the best they can do is Skype, and they're in their basement. but the quality of folks at home kind of went up. Like, oh, okay, I'm on Zoom. I can have a green screen in the background. I can buy a ring light. So it's interesting. But I think that the fact that everyone, do you remember for a while Saturday Night Live, all the folks were separate doing skits in their
Yes.
rooms in New York City or whatever. I think that lowered the bar enough for people to say, okay, if Kate McKinnon can do this with an iPhone, then I can.
I love that. That's so true. It's interesting because I remember seeing some of that too and thinking, first of all, this is great that people are being creative and figuring out a way to still make this happen because how many of us, I'll raise my hand, needed a break during the pandemic, or we still needed some, somebody else to infuse us with humor for just a few
Yeah.
minutes, right? That for me felt like a desperate need. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I appreciated that, but I love what you said about like, although that quality came down, everybody else's came up because
Yeah.
they felt like they could, and so they tried and they did.
Yeah, it sort of leveled the playing field in a way, and I think it gave us
Mm,
permission to be goofy and creative. And I remember, I think for a while Conan O'Brien was using a theater in LA where he had all these standees of the audiences were just the cutout people. So,
yes. Yes.
but when the basketball were playing in empty arenas, but they had monitors, it's like, what? This is crazy.
I know, I
But
remember that. I was gonna say, I remember some sports games where they did that, like put the fake people in the seats. I know.
yeah,
So
but
funny.
that shows you, and that's the lesson for entrepreneurship is you got to sometimes you got to zig when you should zag, and sometimes you got to pivot when you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and on that point, your last comment raised an important point from the perspective because I heard you say, uh, all these people. I mean, figuring out though that they could be themselves and bring that to the cameras. I think that still falls in like a general human struggle category of like, how do I be myself? Right. So even I think some people who are showing up and doing it consistently maybe really don't feel like they've gotten to the point of really infusing the video with their own
Mhm.
personality or whatever. What do you have to say to those of us who feel like we could be more of ourselves and how do we get there?
Yeah, I think part of it is eventually like when we do Zoom meetings like this or Zoom or podcasts, you kind of forget that the camera's there and you just have a conversation. So
Yeah.
ignore the camera. In fact, when we were doing video production, we would often, there was a red light on the camera called the tally light. And all of a sudden when that red light comes on, people panic or they freeze. So we'd turn off the tally light and say, we're just going to do a couple practice ones here. And they were much more comfortable thinking that the camera was off than when the camera was on.
Mm,
I think part of it's like you got to kind of forget the camera. And the other part of it is if you have a brand, the more you infuse your personality, and this isn't just for video, but the more you infuse your personality into that brand, the stronger that brand's going to be,
yeah.
for better or worse. So, I
Yeah.
mean, like right now, Kanye and Elon Musk are not, having a good brand moment, right? But again, yeah, I guess it can work both ways. But again, the more you put yourself into your brand, like I say, when I started out, I was like, where's my little pug Stella? She's gonna she's gonna be the star of this video, so I don't have to be the focus. And it got to the point where people, when I'd go on video, people were like, well, where's the dog?
Where's Stella? Right. This was a great strategy. Totally. No, it is. I love that
Going on
remind.
my website, and I mean, they're everywhere. So it's like, look, if you guys are gonna bark when I'm doing Zoom calls, I'm gonna just have to make you part of the brand.
Oh, it's such a good idea. I actually have a client who in his branding, and he has a dog that he obviously adores, became one of the core pieces of the new brand, right? Like they made a whole cartoon. He actually makes little pillows of this dog and
Um,
like sends it
yeah,
out to new clients. It's this whole thing. But I love that. Just the reminder that it will make your brand stronger one way or another. And I think for me, one of the lessons that I learned and really just paid attention to other people learning early on, because I've always loved, observing businesses and observing entrepreneurs and what's working and what's not working, is the idea that your personality might repel some people.
mhm,
And that's a good thing, right? Embrace the fact that you're not for everybody. And the earlier
mhm.
that you can do that, the better.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I won't go into it now, but I mean, I'm known to drop an occasional F-bomb because I grew up in this tough Italian neighborhood, and sometimes that comes out. And
Right.
Like, hey, if you're too much for some people, those aren't your people.
Yeah, it's so true. I think people get so afraid, especially when they're thinking about how vulnerable they feel being on video or starting a podcast or whatever it is where they feel ultra exposed. I think the first human desire is to be accepted and to fit in every place. And I think one of the first things that we have to do is embrace not fitting in as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur.
And again, one of the trends around video, and I guess this probably came out of the pandemic as well, is just to be more authentic and to be more personal and personable. And so if again, whatever your quirks are, lean into that and just, be as authentic and as you as possible.
So good. So good. Um, excuse me. Um, I'd love to hear your insights on some before and afters of clients that you've worked with that have gone from not having a video strategy or just not doing it very well
Right.
to, sometime later having things clicking along for them. You want to share some of the
Well,
stories
and
that
I will say, in all these years that I've been doing this, I have yet to find a niche or a company that this wouldn't benefit. And most folks,
Mm.
there's only been a few times in the last decade that I've said, maybe you ought to think about radio, a podcast. People are okay once they get into it. I mean, I had a client who lived in Costa Rica, so she already had sort of internet issues. She's like,
Yeah.
I was on the phone with her. She said, I got a new Mac and I'm going to start doing video. Can you tell me where's the on button for this Mac? I mean, that's how tech averse she was. Um, and she started with, total ground zero, total newbie. I don't know where, okay, there's a Mac, there's a camera up there. And in pretty short order, she would do videos about Americans coming to Costa Rica, what to expect, what to do, what
Mm.
need internet access, and just these really authentic tips about travel. And lo and behold, the more she did it, the more views she was getting. One of her views of a sloth in a tree in Costa Rica got 250,000 views on YouTube. And
Wow.
that's the other thing that's kind of fun is that it really only takes one really great video to kind of catch fire and get you going. So not every video she did is going to get 250,000 views, but if somebody who's basically got a little iMac and is, in Costa Rica with crappy internet connection can get 250,000 views on YouTube, then anybody can.
Right. Well, and the thing that reminds me, because I think people again get so focused on like, well, it has to be perfect or a certain production quality or whatever. I have another friend who was working with one of her clients and his videos were terrible. I looked at them like, and
Mhm.
I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm just saying they weren't good. Right.
Right.
But even then it was his message that mattered. Right. So he would show up and there was one video, it was like probably the wrong angle. I want to say like part of his body was cut off. You couldn't even
Mhm.
like, and that was the one that got like some major attention for him, right? And it was such a learning lesson even in his own business about like, oh, here I was so worried about needing to create perfect videos and I totally missed the mark because I didn't even understand what people are
Mhm.
going to like.
Yeah, and I always tell my clients, like, you're not going to the Oscars. This is not the red carpet. This is not who are you wearing. Somebody is going online to find you and the solution you provide, or looking on YouTube. Like the other day, I was like, how do I connect my iPad monitor to my tele? I just went to
Mm.
YouTube and typed it in, and I've got a gazillion results. So I don't care
Right.
the best quality or which one has the clearest sound. I just want
Mm.
the answer to my problem.
Love that. What are you seeing now, kind of, post-pandemic? What trends and things are you seeing that we need to be paying attention to?
Right. Well, we talked a little bit about authenticity. The other big one in
Mhm.
terms of video is personalization. And that's really just a fancy word for video email. So I use a lot of video email to break through the clutter. And, there's a lot of online marketers, there's a lot of noise.
Mhm.
My emails get maybe a 20% open rate. My video emails get a 75% open rate. So I know if I'm trying to get somebody that's a little hard to reach or I want to make that personal connection, I'm just going to send them a Loom video. I don't need any special technology or anything like that. I can do it from my phone or I can just pull up
Right.
Loom,
So
which is
you're
free.
just talking about sitting down and recording a personal message for a single recipient and sending that off. Yeah.
Yep. So that's been in the last couple of years, that's been a big trend that more and more companies have started to do personalization, even large companies where they can, oh, well, we've got the software that will put your name in at the beginning and a
Right.
personal greeting at the end. And so some of it's a little automated, but even that, it's a little, at least it's more personal and engaging than an email blast or just a dump all this information on you.
Totally. Yeah, no, I love that.
Personalization is a biggie.
That's a good reminder. I do have some friends that use that well. As I think about it, I'm like, why am I not doing that?
Yeah, it's kind of low hanging fruit. And the other one is really just short form video, like TikTok, obviously, and YouTube Shorts, and the fact that, you can get a message out in 10 or 15 seconds if you need to.
Yes. Oh, this idea of YouTube Shorts, especially knowing what I'm learning about YouTube, right? I used to treat YouTube, still kind of do. I have a big opportunity to do things better in my own business, but YouTube was like a repository where you just like store things, right? But no, you got to think about it as its own platform, right? It's like one of the key ways. I mean, it's significantly, I think, changed the
Mhm.
way that it's consumed. But the YouTube Shorts
Mhm.
can get a gazillion views. I've
Right.
had
And,
some folks talk about the success of those.
right. And then because things like YouTube Shorts and TikTok are mobile, mobile first and vertical first, for me, it's totally different. Like, oh my God, you want me to make a video that's
This
vertical?
way, that's right.
But it's just totally accepted now and a great way to get out there. And if you think like, oh, I only have to do this for 15 seconds, I think I can get through that. So
Right.
people that say I can't do something in 10 seconds, I'm like, television networks since the 60s have been doing 10-second commercials. So why not?
Right. Yeah, little blips. You just have to think about your messaging a bit differently.
hmm So
Yeah.
short and sweet is good. At the same time, YouTube wants you to do longer videos because they
Mhm.
want each time. So if you have a combination of short, a little burst of videos, and then you've got some other ones that are 10 or 15 minutes, then you're sort of in the perfect spot for YouTube.
I love that. I was going to say, what do the long form content videos look like minimum? Because, like, for me, we were talking about, like, I didn't do video very well except for my Ask Me Anything Live, which started off weekly and then moved to monthly, but I always upload those to YouTube, right? And that's going to be an hour or a little bit over.
Yeah, and I have a client that doesn't Ask Me Anything Live every month, just goes live and answers questions.
Mhm.
So she does it for half an hour. That's sort of like appointment viewing last Tuesday of the month. And I take those and then I cut them into 10-minute or 6-minute segments. So like, okay, well now this 10-minute can fit on LinkedIn, and this 2-minute can fit on YouTube Shorts or TikTok. I mean, TikTok's confusing, changing the length of video that you can put on there, but again, that combination of short form videos and repurposing for different platforms is not as hard as one might think.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anything else that we either should be thinking about or doing already, or what's next on the horizon in the video world?
Yeah, I think again, it's become so mainstream that companies, even good marketing companies, are going to realize that video can't be an afterthought. It has to be integrated and really use it to enhance the things that you're already doing. I'm doing email. Okay, let me do some video email. I'm
Yeah.
doing events. Let me do virtual video events. So really, you can build it into your marketing so that it's part of it rather than an afterthought. Because you don't
Mm.
want to get to okay, we've got our whole marketing plan. Oh crap, what do we do about YouTube? Right?
Well, that's such a key point. I mean, I can hear people right now in their brains being like, oops, like raising their hands to the afterthought part, right? I think so many people it is like, oh, yeah, they think of it
Right.
as separate and it really should be at the forefront of your marketing strategy. Which reminds me, you posted something on LinkedIn. It's probably been months and months ago now, but I remember thinking like, this is so great. I don't know if you have it as an opt-in somewhere. It
Mhm.
was, I think, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. It was
Yeah,
like
we did
a
a video.
single, a video strategy, like how to create a video strategy, like in a single sheet, right?
Yeah, just a little one sheet, and it's like sometimes people need that. Step one, turn on your computer. So it's just a quick guide, kind of a one sheet to here are the 5 or 6 considerations you need to think about. And sometimes when people just have that in writing,
Mhm.
and the back of it's kind of just an Excel sheet that says, I'm going to do this video for this audience on this platform.
Mhm.
So once you kind of organize that, it's much less intimidating and you don't get overwhelmed with, oh my God, YouTube,
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, when you hear the word strategy, I think some people go really big, thinking like, oh, this feels heavy or hard or ominous, and it can be really quite simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Simple is good.
Simple is good. So,
Mhm.
Lou, out of respect for your time, I would love to know, first of all, one more question, and then I'm going to ask where people can find you. But first of all, who do you work with? Who do you love working with? And how can you help them?
Yes, I work mostly with entrepreneurs and small business owners. I love working with small business owners. I've got, everything from yoga instructors to veterinarians to lawyers to accountants.
Right to the
Real
vasectomy guy.
to me, got doctor. I have an OBGYN that has a podcast that I'm
Mhm.
embarrassed to listen to because it's all that lady stuff. But the
I feel
great
like,
thing is I work for pretty much any niche, but
mhm,
I love working with the small businesses because you don't have to go through the approvals and the corporate and the, just the.
all the rigmarole.
So, I worked in higher ed for a little while. I'm like, oh my God, these guys move so slow. And I was just a boom, boom, boom. So I
Yeah.
love the fact that they can, basically make decisions quickly and they can decide, I want to do, and I've actually done this before. I need to do a video course and I want to launch it next week. I'm like, okay, that's actually doable because we just have to do these 7 videos and boom, boom, boom.
I love
So
that. So are you helping people with both the strategy prep side as well as production? Where do you fall?
I do the mostly strategy, but for my one-on-one clients, I also do a lot of done for you. So they'll send me raw
Mm,
edit or I'll help them plan out, okay, these are the videos that we need to do for this particular course that you're teaching, which has become, usually popular. It's like, look, you can scale yourself and clone yourself by creating a video course
yeah,
and you don't have to be teaching it every single time. You do it once
totally.
and then just sell it again and again.
Yeah,
So I do a combination of I don't do actual like shooting with cameras. I
right,
just
right.
be footage, which is nice because they can
No,
be
these days you don't have to. Yeah,
do this on Zoom and then send it to me and then I'll make it look pretty. So
super fun. Do you ever sit down and do like an assessment of a small business and help them identify where they can best utilize video?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's typically where we may start.
Where you
Again,
start?
reverse engineer and say, well, what are you trying to accomplish? Do you want
Mm,
more traffic in the brick and mortar, or do you want to sell more courses or books or whatever it may be? So we often start with the goals and then figure out the best way to help. A video plan that will actually help get them there. Because
love
just
it.
to do video for video's sake is fine, but it's not going to really necessarily move your business.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I feel like I still have like 89 questions I could ask you about this. It's a fun world. It's a really important one. We all need to be on top of our own strategy when it comes to video marketing. For folks that are like, I need to connect with Lou, I need to learn more about his services and his work, where do you show up online and where do you like for people to connect with you?
I'm at loubortone.com, just like it
Mhm.
sounds. And I'm Lou Bortone on all the socials, Facebook,
Mhm.
LinkedIn, YouTube, etc.
Do you have a favorite place to connect?
Ooh, I mean, I probably do. I probably get most of the day-to-day stuff on Facebook, actually, which people would probably think, wait, that's,
Isn't that
not.
interesting? Do you feel like that has changed recently?
Yeah, I mean, Twitter's a little bit crazy right now, and LinkedIn is just, it's very corporate and kind of hit or miss.
Mhm.
Although LinkedIn Lives are doing pretty well. But for me, sort of my first stop is Facebook.
Good to know. Good to
And
know.
again,
And
the audience, because if I say, I remember when my kids were in high school, they said, "Oh, Dad, we saw something of you on Vine or whatever the platform was at the time." I'm like, that doesn't help me at all because high school students are not my audience.
right, not helpful.
Mhm.
I think you've got a gift for the audience, right? Do you want to mention it just for a minute and then I'll direct people to the show notes?
Yeah, thank you. It's at loubortone.com/planner. And it's a one sheet plan, basically. Follow these 5 or 6 steps for getting started with video.
Yeah, I love that. You'll definitely want to check that out. I remember seeing that maybe that was what you even shared on LinkedIn, but thinking, oh my gosh, everybody just needs to do some simple things the right way when it comes to video. So if you're listening, pop over, check that out on the show notes page, legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. Find Lou Bortone's episode. Lou, it's been such a pleasure to have you here. I really appreciate
Great
you.
to speak to you, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
I hope so too. The final question is, what final thought or takeaway would you like to leave our listeners with?
I think it's really just like, look, this is, video doesn't bite. Just give it a try, because it really can have a significant impact on your business, even if you are an introvert like me.
I love that. So important. All right. Thank you, Lou. So great to see you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.